everyone. This is Dan from The Goods, a film podcast. I'm excited to share my conversation with Jason Kulas, the star of the famously bad film After Last Season from 2009, directed by Mark Regan, which we discussed on the podcast a couple of episodes ago. Thanks to Jason for chatting with me, and here we go.
I was a sports writer in college, and then I did one internship as a sports writer, but that was maybe 10, almost 15 years ago, and I have not done too many interviews yet, so I apologize if I'm rusty here, but I appreciate it. We could just be a conversation, you know.
Well, this is the first time I've ever spoken like by voice about After Last Season in public to anyone, so you win the internet. I'm rusty on giving interviews because I've never given one. When people wanted to voice one before, I just said, no, let's just exchange questions and answers, typing them. So, yeah, you win the internet.
Wow.
It's your first interview in a long time, and it's my first one ever about After Last Season.
I am honored. Yeah, thank you.
I was not doing them in the past, and now I figured, whatever.
Yeah. Well, let's start with that. So, I mean, do you still consider yourself an actor? It's been about, 12, 13 years since After Last Season?
Yeah, I still do projects. The pandemic's obviously put a big hit in things, and I'm raising a little 3-year-old boy, so that takes up a lot of my time. So I don't act nearly as much as I would like to. A lot of my plans did not go the direction that I was hoping, but I still do like 48-hour films because they're fun. I have a short film that I think is going to be pretty good, but it's just been in endless editing because of some issues with the editor. They dropped out and they had to get another one. What I have been able to keep up on is essentially radio teleplays. We started going to this radio station, and there's this really good local writer. He's very prolific, and he writes comedies, dramas, and adaptations of public domain things, and inspired sequels and parodies and all and episodic things, short things, long form. And we would record it in a radio station, and we're actually broadcast around the world on radio stations.
Oh, wow.
Not many, I think it's like 30 or 40 stations, but we're also on like podcasts and YouTube and websites. So I get to keep doing that. And we were doing it in a radio station, but then the pandemic hit. Radio stations still will not allow us back to do that. So now we do it over Zoom, but we do keep doing that. So it's a way for me to, and that's easy because I don't even have to leave.
Yeah. Right. It's like I hear voice actors, especially like celebrities, they'll get pitched for some project, and then you could do voice acting in your house for 3 or 4 hours, and then that's like the whole job. I imagine, it's not to say there's not an art to it, but in some ways being able to do it from home is a little bit easier. Yeah,
just, it's less time. Also, I don't even need to memorize. Although I have to work up a bunch of accents for some of the projects. But so yes, I consider myself still an actor. I just don't do as much as I used to or would like to.
And by the way, I'm right there with you. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old daughter, so it's a busy time.
Yeah.
So, I think pretty much any conversation with After Last Season is kind of framed around the perspective that this is a famously critically panned film, a film that doesn't have the highest reputation.
Yep.
And I guess I'm curious, what's your relationship with the fact that you were in a film that's kind of known for being bad? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, okay, before I answer that, I'm just going to put a disclaimer on some of my comments.
Yeah.
Goes to the reason why I wouldn't do voice interviews in the past. People you've seen famous Hollywood actors eventually do some really terrible, embarrassing projects. And they don't go on talk shows and badmouth them. They just don't talk about them. And so when I got most of the requests, which, most of them were, 10 years ago or whatever, I just thought, well, I don't know if I can dance around the questions they might ask me off the cuff live. And I don't want to be unprofessional and tear apart the project. So I just won't do voice interviews. And I've done a lot of paid gigs in improv comedy. I've been in a lot of improv comedy troupes. And obviously, After Last Season's pretty fertile territory, but I didn't want to go there with that. And the other reason, and obviously, okay, everyone knows the film's bad. Professionalism aspect isn't really an issue anymore. But all of my written comments so far, I'm kind of circumspect in them, and I don't know how much I'll rein myself in during this. And it's an issue of kindness towards Mark. Because from all that I know, and I don't know the guy that well, but from all that I know of him, he's like an honest, hardworking, passionate, decent person. And it's my belief that the reaction to the film hurt his feelings very much. And that's a shame. And I've always felt like, I don't want to say something or write something that will be just one more person hurting his feelings. Oh, well, in this case now it's his lead actor associated with this film. So like, I listened to your podcast about, I didn't realize you were doing a pre-podcast about After Last Season before doing our interview, but you did, and I saw it. And I laughed at it. I haven't watched the Red Letter Media video yet because I just haven't had time, but I've read some of the YouTube comments and they're hilarious. But like, I'm like, I could easily go there, and I'm like, I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to dogpile on something, and that was kind of my theory too with Mark. I mean, obviously, I've never met him, and he's famously reclusive at this point. You can't track him down to get anything on the record about this, at least that I've seen. And me and my co-host Brian, we have an enthusiasm for cinema that can be regarded as so bad it's good or something along those lines. And part of that is out of respect that people are out there and doing what they're trying to do. And part of it is that sometimes you can find unexpected charms in things that don't follow the typical paradigm. And, we may have came down kind of hard. I guess I was wondering whether you would have caught up with our remarks on it, because obviously we came down on the negative side on it. But, obviously none of that is intended to be disrespect on anyone involved in the production of it. So I have appreciation for people who are out there like you and, like Mark, whatever was going through his brain as he was making that movie.
And I think too that like, when people skewer the film in extremely insightful and accurate ways, I laugh. We did it, the actors and not all the actors, but a couple of us actors on the set did that extremely quietly and privately amongst ourselves. I've done it with my friends. I just haven't done it publicly.
Sure.
And, like right when the film was getting released and in the weeks afterwards, like Mark had some very specific money-making opportunities thrown in his lap. Some of them via me, because people would contact me and say, what about this opportunity? What about this? You want to do this? I had some ideas, and I tried to get Mark to bite on them, and he would not on any of them. And even years later, when the DVD was in demand, and he would never do an on-demand, like Amazon has an on-demand printing thing, so you don't have to invest up front, you don't need any stock, whatever. And I was like, you could just do this. It would cost you no money, and people could buy. And he wouldn't go for it. And when, fans are looking for the film, he would not make more prints. And he had a variety of reasons why he wouldn't, but I think that they all really probably went back to the fact that he felt bad about the reception. For myself, when I got the script, I read it and I'm like, not a good script. And the ending was sort of not written. Like there were storyboards and there was script, but towards the end, it was just mostly like, because there's not much dialogue in the end anyway. But there wasn't like in a traditional script, you would write out like the direction of what the actors are doing, why they're doing it, what they're, like there would still be, when there's no dialogue, there is still a script that's written. There was no writing. It was just like drawings that I couldn't make any sense of. So I'm like, this is not a good script. And I'm like, but my attitude has always been that like when I accept a gig, I follow through and I honor the other people's time and effort. And so I'm like, but I am getting paid a little bit of money for it. And at least it's all being shot in one block. It's not like 4 weekends that I'm going to drive to, far away. So, I wasn't thrilled with the script. And then I arrive and I'm like, oh, this is the sets. Like, you could have borrowed or paid for or rented or like some other spaces that would be actual, like how hard can it be to find a vet hospital as a stand-in for a real hospital and an actual apartment building or an actual office building for an office building or like whatever. So I'm like, these are the sets. And like, it's like I'm on a middle school play, and then the shooting process, which I will describe a little bit more later. But as I went through the shooting process, I'm like, this is not how you shoot a film. So I knew it was going to be bad. Some of the actors I barely had any time with, and they were brand new, so I don't really know how they felt about things. But the lead actress was experienced, and she was in SAG, and there were some other, and she was the one I spent the most time with. And the guy who played the doctor, he was in SAG, and he was an experienced actor. Like, we knew it wasn't good, and the meme on set was like, oh, it'll get fixed in post. They're going to CGI. Every time we brought up an issue about, like, oh, well, we'll just CGI that later. Like, literally, that was the answer. I'm like,
wow,
yeah, you're not gonna make traveling mats for all of us and green screen us all in and whatever. Because there were no green screens, so like, you're not going to fix this all in post. So I knew it wasn't going to be a good film. And then I saw the trailers, and I would say that I knew it was not going to be a good film, and then I would say that even just from the trailers, I'm like, this is going to be worse than I thought it was going to be. Because obviously when I'm on set, I don't see the framing, I can't really see the lighting, I don't know how the sound's working, I don't know what the editing is going to be like, I don't know about the music, special effects. I didn't even understand really the entire script because it didn't make enough sense. So, I don't know, it was just like confusing script, confusing shooting, confusing trailers. I'm like, and then when I saw the film, I was like, yeah, this is good. So, of course, what I wanted to do was, crawl in a hole and die. But I'm like, my friends are asking me about it. They know about it because it's getting buzz on the internet. So, potential fans are contacting me. People are wanting to interview me. And I'm like, well, all right, I do not have the power to bury this. And so therefore, I guess I'm going to have to write it the best I can. And so I tried to speak positively about the film, truthfully, but omitting maybe some details. And just figured, well, and then once it got moving along, I'm like, well, as long as it's happening, I might as well see if I can get something out of this, right? They say no publicity is bad publicity. Maybe I can get a better gig. Maybe I can get some money out of this project. Maybe, whatever. So I just figured, fine, I'll do what I can with it. It's painful. Every actor that watches themselves can pick apart their own performance, even with a good script and a good director. And, I can rip apart my own performances internally. And obviously a lot easier to do on this film. So I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to have to, I've done a lot of improv comedy, so I'm no stranger to making an absolute fool of myself in public for fun. So I'm like, whatever, people are going to beat on the film, and I'll just deal with the negative and try to see how much positive can come from it. There was that fan group was started on Facebook that you mentioned. That was started by an actual fan. And then the guy became he was still interested, but so dormant. I eventually said, well, you want to make me a moderator? Because I will pay attention. I will occasionally make sure that people are at least get into the group because they applied to get in and they couldn't get in. And I interact on there, but somewhat circumspect. I do make a few jokes.
Sure.
I do make a few jokes, but so I sort of stay a little, a little engaged with what's going on.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. I saw some of your posts there. And I think some of the people in that group, they don't really disdain the movie at all. They kind of see it as a curious artifact in some ways.
Yeah,
I think in some ways that's its like enduring legacy, is that it's just, there's some strange things about it,
It's definitely an experience watching it. On your podcast, I liked what one of the guys said. I can't remember if it was you or somebody else, but late in the discussion of after last season, they were saying something like, maybe his idea was that when you have your routine life, but there's science fiction reality elements intruding into your real life, and there's also maybe murders happening in your community, like you don't know all those things. They're happening to you as you're living your mundane life. And he said maybe that was Mark's conception, and maybe it was. And from that perspective, some of the foundational pieces of the construction of the film, yeah, they're reasonable thought as starting points. Now, it's the execution and the conclusion and the polish where it all falls apart.
Yeah.
But that was an interesting perspective that I hadn't really thought about, because I thought about not that much because people haven't really asked me, but I thought like, how did this be this way? Was it a poorly formed concept, or a great concept with poor execution, but I think maybe it was an unusual concept with unusual execution.
Yeah. Because that sort of thoughtfulness, it doesn't like especially convey in the film, you know, it's just all kind of confusing. But I do wonder like how much of it was supposed to like have this naturalism to it that is maybe there in some of the improvisational dialogue or dialogue that seems to be talking about totally unrelated stuff. How much were you asked to improvise on set?
So as far as I know, no dialogue was improvised. What did happen was, even though he said, like, even though it was clear that English was not his first language, even though he denied that, it was clear both from his writing and from speaking to him in person that it wasn't his first language. And so what typically happened is the lead actress and I completely rewrote our scenes 10 minutes before shooting them to make them more, you know, colloquial, natural, vernacular. And so we weren't improvising. And I think that the doctor was an experienced actor, but he wasn't there very long. She and I were there a lot, and I don't think anyone had near the level of experience that she and I had. So I don't think anyone else did that. And so as far as I know, it was all scripted. And, you know, I would occasionally, I mean, in the beginning I would ask, and then eventually I gave up. I'd ask Mark, like, you know, what else about Matt? You know, what else is going on here? What else do you want out of him? What else are you thinking about him? And he's just like, he's just a regular guy. No, just, you know. So I think he wanted it very routine. So I'll say something about the shooting process. So, you know, in a normal film, you shoot the master, close up of this actor, all their dialogue and close up and all the reaction shots and whatever. None of this was filmed that way. I don't think we ever shot an entire scene through with two actors acting out the scene. He had his hand-drawn storyboards. He knew in his head in advance what shots he wanted in the final edit. And so I think basically to avoid using a film stock and avoid spending time editing, he didn't shoot coverage at all. He would be like, I know, you know, I think probably on his head is, I want 3 seconds of master shot at the beginning of this scene and 3 seconds at the end. So I'm only going to shoot 3 seconds of master of the beginning couple lines and 3 seconds of master of the ending couple lines. So we didn't shoot a whole scene. We would just do couple lines. And then when it came to close-ups, certainly for every single one of my close-ups, there are no other actors in the room. No one is speaking to me. He would just say, stand here, look that way. The camera's set up here. I would say, how tight is it? And then he would say this line from that scene. And I would say it. And he'd say, now say that line from this scene. And they were all massively out of order. And I think what it was is he knew what frame and position and framing, whatever that he thought he needed for these specific lines at these specific points in the film. So I'm just speaking to empty space. It's near certainty that there is never actually an actual reaction shot in the film. Like, it's never an actor or never me hearing somebody and reacting to them. What I think always happened was, you know, you're standing there, you're waiting, and then you hear, like, you know, lights, you know, rolling, sound, action. And then you wait a beat. You want to make sure the word action has faded from the dialogue. Maybe you're setting yourself mentally. So there's a couple seconds of like, you're just blank, you know, and then you're like, and then you take a breath and then you do your line or a couple lines or whatever. And what I think he did is he used those blank moments. I think in his head, maybe he thought that is the reaction to the previous line of dialogue that he knows he will be editing in. Or maybe in some cases, he actually cut that piece out and said, this is the reaction. So, like, I feel confident for me that every reaction shot for me is just me going, waiting to begin acting. And probably for the lead actress too, because she and I are in most of the film. We spent most of the time together. We were under the exact same shooting conditions, and the process was the same. And part of the reason why, and you could even see, there's a point, like, I don't know, halfway through the film where, like, I start speaking a line, like 6 words in, I just misspeak, whatever. So I stop, I wait a pause to leave for an edit point, and I restart the line, assuming that the first part will get cut out. It's not. It's in the film. You'll see I start speaking, I stop speaking, and then I restart speaking the exact same line, only correctly. And so, like, the amount of editing on this film was minimal.
Interesting.
Because there wasn't even much to edit. It wasn't like you had a whole bunch of master and a whole bunch of close-up of this actor, all their dialogue, all their close-up. The reason why there are no other actors in the room is we are filming most of this film for like 5 days in a row in northern Massachusetts in January in a non-heated space. And we're wearing light street, and I didn't know that was the case, so I didn't bring like thermal underwear or whatever else. So we are freezing to death while we're shooting this film. And so basically, when it isn't your close-up, you've left to go someplace warm. And you can actually see, and this is what I noticed in the trailer. I noticed, which is why I knew that, like, oh God, this is worse than I thought. I can see that my nose is red, that I can see my breath in some of the shots, that my face is like pale from the cold. And I don't know if it shows up in the trailer, but definitely in the film. There's times where I'm lisping because my lips are so cold I can't speak properly.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is, I didn't realize, I didn't realize that's how cold I was when I was shooting. But then when I watch it, I go, oh, yeah. So, well, although even with all that, I mean, there was times where like I'm sitting across from the lead actress and we've locked eyes and we're doing our dialogue, which is not terribly emotional, but whatever. But like, I feel like she's really present. She is really there. And I feel like, okay, we are not exciting characters. We are not doing an exciting scene, but we are really in the moment here. And it felt good, even though I know that the scene itself was like, no one's going to really care. And there was a comment in the YouTube about something like, I feel like the actors must have been lied to because they're delivering these ordinary lines with such sincerity. And I'm like, yeah, we are, but we just have much to work with.
Not much of an opportunity to give like an organic sense of like interacting with the different actors and like what your interiority your character might have in this situation or anything like that.
Well, and here was the other thing that I knew when I got back before I ever saw the film. I was telling my friends, look, we're probably going to seem schizophrenic because a single scene might be composed of lines that were shot over multiple days. One line on day one line from day three. And so like your energy at the time of day, was it shot in the morning or the night? What was your energy level like? Are you currently fighting a virus because you've been freezing for 3 or 4 days? Are your lips frozen? Like, did you just walk in from a warm area, or you've been sitting in this cold area for 10 minutes before they shot this? And so like in a single scene, the amount of like variability in each actor, I figured it's probably going to be like, if you pick it apart, and I haven't, but I'm sure if I like studied scene, I'm like, oh yeah, there's no way that line was shot on the same day as that line. Like that line was clearly shot when I was warm and recently fed, and this line was clearly shot days on another day when I was freezing to death and tired and cold and whatever. So I think that probably contributes to the effect of the film, because the actors themselves they just late in the film where there wasn't anything written for the script, so I didn't really know what was happening. The director would basically like, stand there, look that way, and react. Okay, what are we reacting to? We'll just look over that way and walk. And so like, walk slowly to the left. Okay, this is what I'm doing. And I'm like, where is that footage going to end up in the film? Am I reacting appropriately to the thing because I don't even know what the thing is? And I don't know when I saw it. I don't know if you're familiar with the Three Colors films by the famous Polish director, Krzysztof
Kieslowski, I think. Yeah.
Kieslowski, yeah. And there's this behind the scenes with Juliette Binoche saying, she was talking about some scene she did where she's like in a car and I don't know. And she's like, I don't know what the scene was about. I don't know what I was supposed to be doing, but the director said, do this. So I did that. It's kind of like, you're a meat puppet. And I feel like, okay, for parts of this film, I was a meat puppet. And what they say in Hollywood is like, you have to trust your director, because if your director has good ideas and good execution, you will look fine. And if they have not good ideas or not good execution, you can look terrible. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know how that footage is getting used. I don't know if it was appropriate to where it will get used, because I'm not even sure what it was I was supposed to be doing. And unfortunately, Mark is not Krzysztof Kieslowski. So
yeah,
I think some of that stuff did not work out the way you'd hope.
Right. Let's talk about Mark for a minute. So I'm curious, do you have any relationship with him at this point? Do you keep up with him at all?
I mean, I kept emailing him periodically because fans would contact me and they film school wanted to show it in California and have people fly out and do Q&A. Brooklyn Academy of Music wanted to show it, have a Q&A. Theaters wanted to engage it. Fans wanted to like have me autograph things, and people wanted to do Q&As and documentaries and buy DVD copies. So I would periodically email about the film, about like, how's it going? How did you plan? You said you were going to work with distributors. How did that work out? I found this opportunity, whatever. And so we corresponded periodically until about 2015. And then at some point after that, my contact information just became no good anymore. And I couldn't reach him. I'm like, and I know people have tried to find him since then. Doesn't seem to really want to communicate. So I have not kept up with him.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that it didn't seem like English was his first language. And I need to, if I ever watch the film again, think about the dialogue and the story from that perspective. But what were some of your other impressions working with him? I mean, you've mentioned in the past that he seemed like a nice guy. What else can you say about him?
I mean, when I got back from the film experience, I was writing to friends about it. I'm like, he's dedicated, he's passionate, he's really hardworking. He's actually quite organized. I mean, because, it's not easy work to do. I mean, the crew was really just him and the cinematographer. And, okay, the sets aren't good, but still things had to be physically prepared and moved and put into place and built, although in some cases the building was not much of anything. But, there is set dressing, not much, but, in other words, there's a lot of, you've got to get power and lights. And we had big movie lights, not the right placement of them, the right use of them, but like, they had a boom mic. They had like, and he's doing this mostly himself. He's like the producer, the director, the writer, he's doing, and he's doing a lot of these jobs himself. And that's not easy work. Even to do it at all, even without polish, is still takes time and effort. So, he seemed like a nice guy. He seemed friendly. There were theories about is this money laundering or whatever else. Like, it could be, but that's not what I would. I would guess either. That claimed budget, I would guess either somebody ripped him off or, independent productions like to talk up their apparent cost to make themselves sound like a big expensive thing, so a distributor might pay more for it. So maybe it was just, in a sense, puffery. And of course, during the shooting, I don't know what it's going to look like through the lens. I don't know what it's going to sound like through the boom mic. I don't know how it's going to be edited. So like, so I'm like, okay, there's clearly a lot of problems with how this is being shot and how it's being set up. And so clearly, whatever, he's not experienced. He's not like super competent or whatever, super skilled, but like, he's working hard, and he's got ideas.
Yeah. My co-host, Brian, he ran a public access TV show for a better part of 10 years. I think it was like 8 or 9 years. And I got to participate every now and then. And one thing that always struck me is that there's just so many little pieces you got to put together. So even it's like the final quote from Ratatouille when the critic is like talking about how the quote unquote average piece of junk has more value and effort in it than we probably ever acknowledge. It's like, even to make something is kind of cool, at least from my perspective. It's like you're putting yourself out there. You're like you said, there's a lot of physical details required to even do something like that, especially if you're shooting on film, there's like, and you have a rental space and stuff. So, there is at least some amount of like basic physical competency that's required, like logistical operations required to make a thing. Yeah. So, and
I mean, in indie filmmaking, the adage often is like to even finish a film, like finish it where it gets edited. Because how many indie projects either never finish shooting or finish shooting but never finish editing? So to even complete a film, it's a mark of accomplishment to a degree. And this film was finished, and although I was not sure it was ever going to see the light of day, and then what I was being told is it's never going to have a DVD release. It's only go to theaters. And so I'm like, okay, people are already talking about this film. People are going to talk about this film. I need to have seen this film. I drove to Rochester, New York to see the film in a theater, and there were people in the theater. I drove in order to see it because I'm like, otherwise I might never see this film.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was, he said, no, we're not going to release on DVD. So I'm like, okay, then I guess I'm only going to see this film if I drive to Rochester.
Yeah, better see it. Yeah.
So I did. And I think on the I took a picture of the marquee. I think on the marquee was like one of the Star Trek films at the same time.
That's pretty funny.
It's a big old Cinemark theater.
I saw on IMDb that he's credited with a short film, Medium Waves. Do you know anything about that?
I mean, I've heard about it. I've read people talking about it. It apparently has a lot in common with the themes and some of the specific elements of After Last Season, but I haven't seen it. And so I don't really, I don't know anything about it. Other than what anybody else could find via Google and
of course, yeah. Because I spent 5 minutes Googling it, and I'm not the world's best deep dive internet searcher, but I didn't come across a copy of it or anything like that. So one thing that I was kind of curious about, and you touched on this a little, but thinking about Troll 2, there was a documentary made by that where some of the cast members have kind of owned it as this famously so bad it's good movie, and then you have The Room, which has also taken on a life of its own. It sounds like Mark has no interest in that, and that, I can respect that. But I'm curious, have you ever been interested in reclaiming it and buying in on some of the enthusiasm, even if some of it's tilted negative, or at least fascinated, I guess, with how people are perceiving this film?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's pretty clear that Mark does not want to. I mean, he had so many opportunities. Theaters wanted to book this film, and people still wanted to buy DVDs, and and film schools wanted to host us. So clearly, he's not going to embrace. And I think it was his passion project, and he didn't. I don't think he realized how it would be received, and I don't think he's happy with how it received. Myself, when I saw the trailer, I'm like, of course, half of me is like, I want to die and crawl under a rock and just disappear, but I can't make the project go away. So I might as well embrace it the best I can, do the most I can with it. So absolutely, starting with before the film even made it to the theaters, I started okay, although this is the first time I've ever spoken publicly about the film, there's been a lot of discussion about, will you come for a Q&A? And I basically always said, yes, I will. But the problem is they couldn't get the rights to show the film. So never have. There's a guy who wants to do some kind of Q&A in New York City sometime in the next few months. And I assume it will not include a film showing, but I don't know what his plans are on that. But sure, I said, sure, I'll come to Brooklyn or wherever it is to do your Q&A. But none of them ever actually happened. But people have talked about doing sequels and anniversary things and whatever. And I was always like, yep, I'm available. Sure. You want to do that? I'll do it. I mean, assuming it works out with my life and schedule are, but
right.
Basically, yes, I embraced what I am. I embraced the ride that I am on. I still mostly stayed kind of circumspect about embracing it, but I make it pretty clear that yes, you want to, people at one point, there's people in California that wanted to do a sequel and they wanted me to come out there. And I'm like, sure, let's just, when you're ready to talk details, let's talk. Now the project fell apart.
Sure.
Come back to me, whatever. But I said, sure, I'll do whatever. People want to do documentaries. I don't think any of them have ever, things got in the way and they never actually did them, but I'm like, sure, I'll be in your documentary. So, yes, I've embraced it.
Gotcha. No, that's respectable. It's, in some ways, it's, I've read different artists kind of reflecting on having a legacy at all, and what is that legacy? And to some extent, it's kind of cool that I don't know, putting myself in your shoes, that even if it's a project that the outcome itself might not be a thing that you would be proud of, even being involved in something that people are still talking about and still curious about, and there's some kind of appeal to that, I think. I don't know.
It is certainly interesting that this many years later, I still, a couple times a year, I get somebody emailing me or Facebook messaging or whatever, wanting to ask me questions or say that they enjoyed the film, and I was right back, what did you like about it? Because I want to know, how did this work for you? I've had people make me T-shirts and send me DVDs to autograph and stuff like that. So people are still engaged with it, and that's interesting, I suppose. That's kind of like you're not the first podcast to ask me. Although the last one was probably a few years ago. But I'm like, what's the point? And I'm really more of a film oriented person anyway. So I'm like, I'm excited to be in a documentary. Podcast didn't really excite me that much. I'm like, why talk about it? Like, what's the point? But now it's like, well, first of all, I started listening to more podcasts on my own, and so I'm more oriented towards them. But also, it's like, all right, there's nobody in the know about this film that's talking about it. Like, Mark's not talking about it. The lead actress, she's not talking about it. I know some of the other co-stars who probably would talk about it, but they're not really in the public eye, and they're not trying to be. And they, so I'm like, okay, they're still curious. This many years later, people are still curious about this film, and nobody's talking about it. So I'm like, okay, I should finally talk about this film because I've never talked about the film publicly. To friends, yes, but
yeah.
So I'm like, it's clearly a phenomenon, not a big one. It could be bigger. I mean, if DVDs could be purchased, if sequels were made, if the rights were available, if showings were happening, it would probably be a bigger phenomenon. There was a comment from somebody who watched the film like, get really high and then watch the film.
So you mentioned, well, you kind of already talked a little bit about the budget. So that seems to be one of the topics of enduring fascination with this film.
Oh yeah, it started at the very beginning, when the first claims went out in articles it was 5 million. I'm like, yeah, there's no way it was 5 million. And my thought had always been that was simply, puffery, just for example, as far as I know, he got free access to the space that most of the film was shot in. And it was basically some unused retail space and warehouse and storage space. And it was large and it was empty. And I believe, like I said, I believe his access was free through family connections. But, to make your budget sound good, the value contributed to just like if someone lends you a fancy sports car for free for your independent film, okay, it costs you nothing, but the value it adds to the production is the equivalent of, the thousands of dollars it would have cost you to rent that sports car for a day or a week or a month. So indie productions will say, we had a budget of this, but what they're really saying is, this is what the budget would have had to have been had we paid for everything. So I assume maybe some of that was the case, where it's like, well, maybe he got the effects done on the cheap, and maybe he got the shooting space for free, and maybe he got the film stock for free for all it. Like, so maybe that was it. But then it was other people have been brought up. Maybe he was ripped off. Other people have brought up money laundering, all that kind of stuff, tax schemes, whatever. And like, I don't know,
No idea. Yeah.
Although personally, after the audition, I'm like, wow, this is like. So the audition was a little weird. It was done in I don't even know if they have them. Like Barnes and Nobles used to have coffee shops in the corner of the coffee shop.
Okay, yeah.
And that's where the audition took place. We're in the middle of a Barnes and Noble, in the middle of a coffee shop with people all around us drinking coffee and buying books, and that's where the audition takes place.
Really?
Which is a little strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, because I've done some weird and high pressure auditions before. Also done a lot of improv comedy. So like, I'm capable of just like, I don't care who's around me. I don't care what they think of me. I'm going to do what I feel I need to do to, perform this scene or do this. So basically like, we're in this coffee shop and we're auditioning. Like, I obviously I cut my volume down some because, we are in public, but like,
yeah, it's like a library or something. Yeah.
Right. But it's like, if people are going to look weird at me, oh, well, look at me weird. I don't care. I'm doing this. So we had the audition. That was strange. But I'm thinking, okay, this is union compliant. It's full time because I'm shooting for like 5 or 6 days straight. It's paid, not well. And I'm like, oh, and it's shot on film. And I mean, I'm not a film expert, but I thought between like the film costs, developing, printing, negatives, editing, like that's got to be like, $50,000 budget or something. I'm like, this is the highest budgeted film I've ever done. This is gonna be great. When I got cast, I was like, I was excited, but I don't know where the money went. Clearly, you couldn't have spent $5 million on this, unless you were ripped off.
Yeah. The explanation that it went to the CGI really doesn't stand up to scrutiny. I mean, you know, I'm no artist, but I feel like I could have done what was in there with a day of practice and some sort of rendering software. And as someone pointed out when we were talking about it on the podcast, this was the same year that Avatar came out. So it's not like the early days of CGI or anything like that. Not that you'd expect Avatar out of that, but you know.
Yeah.
How often do you watch the movie? Like, do you ever go be like, hey, be a gas right now is to put on After Last Season?
So I'm not a fan of bad cinema.
Okay.
Like I've never actually seen The Room. I've seen the James Franco movie about The Room and enjoyed that, but I've never actually watched The Room. I mean, I'll watch a bad film if I'm in it, and I'll watch a bad film if a friend of mine directed it or is the star of it. But other than that, I don't really watch bad films. So I saw After Last Season in the theater, and then I had friends that insisted on a mass screening. So I saw it with like 40 of my friends together in a very large apartment. So I've seen it twice back in 2009, and I haven't watched it since. I did buy the riff tracks, although due to some weird issue on their store, I can still go back and re-download my purchase of the riff tracks. But if you go to the store right now, you won't find it to purchase. They screwed up their store catalog, and I don't think they realized which titles have dropped out. They actually had to fix it for me to even be able to re-download my purchase. But even though I bought the riff tracks, I have not rewatched the film with the riff tracks. Now if someone's doing a public screening, which I guess would not be legal, but whatever. People have invited me to public screenings. I wasn't sure I'll go, but none of them actually happened. So basically, I've seen the film twice in 2009. Although to be fair, even for my other films, I'm very interested in watching them once. I'm rarely interested in watching them more than once. Because I rip apart my own performance. And even there's been a few films, like there was an indie comedy called Burial Boys, and I'm like a medium small part in it, but it's like a ridiculous comedy. I'm like this flamboyantly gay hairdresser, makeup artist, whatever. And that film is just, it's somewhat entertaining. And so I've seen that. I didn't like watch it on my own, but like I've seen it more than once in different contexts. There's a short film I did called The Safe Room, and it's like a first-time director, and we're shooting in a very rushed single afternoon. So there's parts where I go like, oh God, I don't like what I did there. Did the director even notice? Why didn't he say, Jason, I didn't believe that, like do it again? But like overall, I thought the director was really good for a first-time director. Like you wouldn't think he's a first-time director, I think, if you watch the film. And I liked his concept, I liked his script, I liked his execution. I liked 90% of what I did in there. So I will watch that and be like, and I've watched it more than once, sometimes because about to send it to somebody or someone else, and I'm like, yeah, I like that. That worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
But most of my projects, whatever, whether it's how polished the project is, how good the script was, how good the execution was, how big my part was, how good I feel about what I did in it. There's been some other short films that like came off well, and I was happy enough with most of my performance that like it didn't like make me go like, oh God, I don't want to see that again. Like I'll watch it. I'm glad I watched it once for the learning experience, be like, okay, that did not work, and I really wish the director had also felt the same or had noticed or whatever.
Sure.
But and in some cases, like, well, we only had time for one take anyway, so whatever you did, that's what you did. So I don't generally watch the things I did. I think the first film I ever did, first film ever, actually. It was a feature film. I was the star or co-star, Old Man. And that I think I've seen more than once in various contexts. But no, there's, other than the occasional short, like some of the 48-hour films have been funny.
Yeah.
And interesting enough. And I'll go rewatch some of those every, whatever. It's usually in the context of somebody wants to do a film project, and they'll be like, what do you have that you can show me that's posted somewhere? And I'll be like, let me look through it, and like, oh yeah, I like that one. That was kind of good. And I might go, but I don't want to send it to them. Or I like the one, and I'll send it to them. But like, I'll enjoy the rewatching.
Yeah.
Of some of them. So
easy when it's shorter like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like a short film has to be more focused. And if it isn't, you're not going to watch it. It's 3 minutes that you're never going to, 3 to 5, it's 5 minutes that you're never going to watch. Or if they accomplished having sufficient focus and polish, it's just 5 minutes to watch it. You'll watch it and you're
Yeah, exactly.
done. But a feature has so much room to be like, oh, it was weak in the middle or dragged on at the end. And it's an hour and a half investment to watch the film. And are you gonna do that unless you like really like the film and really like seeing yourself in it or whatever?
Well, you mentioned you're not a fan of bad cinema, but I imagine being an actor, you probably love movies in general. What are some of your favorites? Like what draws you to the movies?
So I would say probably pretty boring stereotypical. Like I'm into science fiction and fantasy a lot.
Okay.
And like I always have been. I'm a martial artist. I've dabbled in my own like special effects and filmmaking. I'm into video gaming and digital creation and a little bit of 3D modeling and programming. And so I'm drawn to like spectacle and visual films, Star Wars, The Matrix, probably almost any superhero film, even if it's not very good.
Sure. Yeah.
Those are the things that I gravitate to. And then there's, and they're the things I remember. Like, there's a movie just in the past couple years. Oh, it's a woman and her child locked in like a shed.
Oh, Room, I think it's called.
Yeah, it's like Room, but not The Room. It's Room. And like that was to me, that was like a very touching, powerful film. But I don't necessarily remember how much I enjoyed it, or like I forget some of the, like I remember the spectacle films because I'm mostly oriented towards science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah, you like the fun stuff
and action. Yeah, but I mean, but there have been films that aren't that I still thought were fantastic. I just don't remember them, unless I put enough thought into them. Like I thought Groundhog Day is a Zen romantic comedy, and I thought from that perspective, that's great. Princess Bride, like to me, I love some of the kind of dry humor in there. What was the one I was thinking about? There's a movie that never really got much notice called Dot the I, and it's the letter I, and it's got Gael Garcia Bernal in it.
Okay.
He's like the co-star, and I saw that film at like an indie film house when it came out, and it's this film where it's full of twists and turns, like layers. It's like you think you know what's happening, and then you learn a layer, and then you learn another layer. And it's not a deep message, but I really enjoyed it. I don't know. So there's been a lot of films where like I thought the message was really good, but I don't necessarily remember how much I loved them.
Sure.
Unless I keep a list or something, which I don't. But I do. Yes, I do like films. I do, and I mean, being in films is a lot of fun.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's like I said. My friend, the co-host Brian, he did his public access show, and we always got a kick. We did a few screenings of his episodes at like house parties and stuff, and it's fun to see. Even if it's a little silly, it's fun to see yourself in there. And maybe less so if it's like your professional craft that you're trying to work on, and you're being self-critical about it. I hear that and understand that, but it is. I respect the going in there and putting yourself in there, and there's something exciting about that. So yeah.
Well, there's a thing too that some famous Hollywood actor said this, and I didn't think about it until he said it, but it's like, oh, this is right. To a lot of actors, being in a film is like a drug. The drug is the performance when you're there on set, and then when that's over, what you're looking for is your next hit. So you don't necessarily care about what you were just in. What you want to do is be in another one, because you're getting to do these unusual experiences and step outside yourself and play, and that's what you really love about filmmaking, is that it's almost like it's a high. If somebody said like, here's a bunch of money and we'll fly you anywhere in the world, have any vacation you want, put you in a hotel, whatever else, or you can come do this film and suffer and freeze and have a sleepless night. What's the most fun to you? I want to do the film, like, so, loving performing isn't quite the same as loving watching films. like, the people that analyze, like the podcasts like yours, the people that are analyzing and watching films, like films in a different way than in the way that I like films. Although I do obviously like them, and I can analyze them, but a lot of times I don't even try. I watch some not terribly great superhero film, and I'm like, yeah, that was, whatever.
Did you see Black Adam this past year?
I did.
Yeah.
And I liked it.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't seen that one, but what my friend said is that's exactly what you're describing. It's like you go in and you get a blast of kinetic energy and excitement and fantasy action, and then you're kind of done. You're like, well, I don't know if that was good, but I had fun time and I had a bag of popcorn. So hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is, well spent.
Yeah. Yeah. I like doing all kinds of things. I've played paintball and skydiving and do martial arts. And I like to do, I guess I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. And so a film like that is kind of is a way to sort of get a little tiny taste of that, but you don't have to go anywhere or do anything. You're just sitting in your movie chair watching it, and yeah, I like that feeling because it's the one little hint of the kinds of feelings I like to experience in real life activities. So,
yeah, well, that's cool. I'm sure you're a busy man, and I really thank you. This was enlightening for me, and always. Like I said, I'm out of the interviewing game, and this is the first time we've had someone involved with one of the films on our podcast. But I really appreciate you spending an hour here talking with me, an hour or so. And, before we sign off, I guess, is there anything that you wanted to pitch or anything you wanted to add on before we wrap here?
The only thing I would say is you can look up Nutmeg Junction, which is a website. It's a Facebook. There's a private and a public Facebook group, and I know we've got some presence on podcasts and YouTube. I think the YouTube presence was a little dormant, but I think they were reviving. I don't know, but that's where we do the radio teleplays.
Okay, yeah.
And, they're sometimes done a little bit quick, but I think some of them have been very funny, and some of them have some good drama, and there's a massive variety. I'm not in all of them, but I'm in a lot of them. And there's we have some serial episodic stuff on there that comes in installments, and then we have one-off things. And so, that's because I have a film in editing, but it's not out yet. And, there's not much other than old footage of me, which you can if you search me on YouTube and around the internet, you'll find bits and bytes of me around. But Nutmeg Junction's a current thing. Okay, cool. Yeah. They want to expand viewership and expand distribution. So,
okay. Send me a link and I'll put it in our episode description, and I'll put it on our Discord too.
It's slightly conceived as an old timey radio show.
Gotcha.
Anyway, yeah. So I'll send a link. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate you spending the time, and best wishes.
You've got a rare scoop because I've never talked publicly about the film. So your first interview of time, and you've got what nobody else has.
Special sauce. No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
All right. Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you.